This ultimate guide to question 4 from the OCR GCSE English Language Paper 2 will show you exactly what you need to do to get full marks. After explaining the mark scheme in straightforward English, I will include some phrases that you can plonk straight into your own response before moving onto an actual past paper question from November 2017. I will show you how to annotate this text before giving you the opportunity to write your own response. My model 18 out of 18 response will then appear on screen, and I'll talk you through how it achieves the criteria in the top bands of the mark scheme. Finally, I will share with you the examiner's indicative content and some invaluable comments gleaned from the official OCR Examiner reports before summing things up. Let's get you higher marks for OCR GCSE English Language Paper 2, Question 4. This is Schofield on Shakespeare. So there are 18 marks for this question, but this is split into two sections. 12 marks are for AO4. This is for the quality of your evaluation and your use of appropriate quotations. What exactly do we mean by evaluation? Well, for me, it relates to weighing up, considering both sides to a statement, sometimes agreeing, sometimes disagreeing, sometimes quibbling slightly. At the top ends, your evaluation will be sustained, perceptive, and considered. Meanwhile, your quotations will fit perfectly within the structure of your sentence and will have been carefully chosen. And then AO3 out of 6 relates to your ability to compare the writer's ideas and perspectives across the two texts. At the top ends, your comparison needs to be detailed and interwoven. Thus, clearly, you will need to use plenty of these kinds of words and phrases. Press pause if you would like to copy this table down. The video will resume in 5 seconds' time. Time now to do some practice. Here's the question from the November 2017 Paper 2. We are asked, in these texts, a hunt for a person is presented as an exciting and frightening experience. How far do you agree with this statement? In your answer, you should discuss the characters' different experiences of the hunts, explain what you find exciting or frightening about their experience, compare the ways the writers present the characters' experience of the hunts, support your response with quotations from both texts. Now for the texts. You obviously need to read them. Probably the easiest thing is for you to download the November 2017 reading booklet from the OCR website. You can see on screen now how you would do this. However, I will also display the text on individual slides within this video, which will proceed at 5-second intervals in case you would prefer to read the text this way. Either way, get reading. When approaching these questions, especially those for which a relatively high number of marks are available, plan, annotate, think. Your annotations could look something like those about to appear on screen. Press pause when they appear if you would like to scrutinize in detail. Hopefully that's given you some really good ideas. Time now to write your own response. In the exam booklet, you are given 2 sides of A4 to complete the response, for which 18 marks are available. It can be tricky to estimate timings for individual sections, but it's worth noting that you have 2 hours for the full exam, and there are a total of 80 marks available. Mathematically speaking then, a crude measure, you would expect to spend an absolute maximum of 30 minutes on this. So get cracking, press pause now. The extracts will reappear again at brief intervals. How did you get on? Sharply focus on the question, plenty of intelligent evaluation, embedded quotations, and comparisons between the texts? Here's what I wrote. Text 1 is written from the perspective of someone being hunted, whereas text 2 is from the perspective of the hunters. However, in both texts, the hunt for a person is presented as frightening and exciting, partly because of the potential dangers involved to the protagonists. For instance, the physical threat of the hunters in text 1 is shown by the fact all had pistols, and they are clearly hell-bent on finding their man, as illustrated by their kicking and arguing fiercely. Similarly, in text 2, the man being hunted hurled a rock, which nearly hits Dr. Watson and Sir Henry. However, I would argue that text 2 is more frightening because the enemy is described in far more horrifying detail. He has an evil yellow face, a terrible animal face, which might well have belonged to one of those old savages. By contrast, no small details are given about the enemy in text 1, although it is notable that there are numerous attackers rather than just one. Instead, there are more general descriptions of men speaking throatily and sounds, which build up less tension and are less frightening. That said, the intricacies of the escape are arguably more exciting in text 1. The escape is clearly difficult for the protagonist. He had to crawl down a broken ladder, peep out and prospect, and his experiences have very real physical consequences, including a shoulder and arm aching like hell and feeling sick and giddy. By contrast, in text 2, the nighttime setting makes it much harder to see details. Generally, it is only possible to see a glimpse, and so we as readers are unaware exactly what the criminal needs to do to get away. Additionally, there is no mention of any physical injuries sustained. Those chasing are described as fair runners and in good condition, and there is no suggestion that they are particularly diminished by the encounter, apart from feeling out of breath and panting. Thus, one argument might be that text 1 is more exciting due to the more detailed insight into movements and the considerable physical impact of the attempted escape. However, in actual fact, I feel that the atmospheric nighttime description within text 2 helps build up a more sinister, exciting atmosphere. The fact that the initial clue is just a single candle many miles away creates an air of mystery, whilst a moment when the moon broke through the clouds helps the hunters catch sight of the criminal in an unexpected, exciting way. In contrast, far less is left to the imagination in text 1, and in my view, more prosaic references to a ransacked mill, rotten planking, and mill buildings do not create the same dramatic, suggestive atmosphere which is present in text 2. How does this response meet the top band of the mark scheme? Well, note from the very word go that I am comparing, as signified by words such as whereas, both, and similarly, used within the first 4 sentences. I'm not just explaining first how text 1 is pretty exciting and frightening, before moving on to text 2 and saying how this is exciting and frightening. Note here that I am evaluating with my suggestion that text 1 may be more exciting because we are given such small details about how he tries to get away. Crucially, I develop and sustain this evaluation by giving another point. Text 1 contains actual physical injuries and distress. Text 2 does not. So from this angle, text 1 might be considered more exciting. However, note the caution in my phrasing. I state that one argument might be, which sets my piece up nicely to give an alternative view in the subsequent paragraph, thus ensuring that my response is perceptive and considered. Finally, note the skillful use of embedded quotations. There are 4 within the 3 sentences shown on screen, with 2 of them being splendidly short. Note how these quotations are taken from different parts of both texts, but are put together seamlessly to aid my critical evaluation. Remember also that the examiner is given some indicative content, some suggested points that a candidate might make to help them with their marking, with these suggestions split into sections for AO4, evaluation, and AO3, comparison. These are only suggestions, but will appear on screen now in 5-second intervals. Press pause to read these through. And finally, exam boards provide a report summarising what candidates did well and what they struggled with for each question. Here are some selected comments which you may find helpful. Let's read them through. Almost all candidates were clearly conscious too that this is a task-driven exercise in which there needs to be a yes but approach to how far do you agree. Even candidates who started their answer with I agree completely, or more dangerously with I disagree completely, soon changed their minds to a more balanced approach as they developed their thoughts. The level descriptor hierarchy was very clear, making AO3 straightforward to assess. Did answers compare throughout, showing a clear understanding of how the passages work? Did they make some attempts to compare and support them? Or did they simply write rather randomly about one passage and then the other? Or at the bottom end, write about one but not the other? No particular approach necessarily guaranteed a higher or lower mark here, because that was dependent on the quality of what was said. But generally, the greater the comparison, the better the analysis. Most candidates made a fair attempt at comparing the texts, most focusing on content, hunter versus hunted, weapons, escape. Few candidates compared language. Weaker candidates offered up their own views as a means of responding, rather than any informed, critical evaluation. Many candidates also seemed to think that lavishing praise on the writers would secure them a high mark, in the absence of any analysis. So what's required to get the full 18 marks in question 4 from paper 2? Well, examiners are looking for lots of embedded quotations, a nuanced response to the question, i.e. some partial agreement with the statement, some partial disagreement, some quibbling, some rephrasing, and comparisons throughout. Good luck, and many thanks for watching Schofield on Shakespeare.